On today's show, we're going to be talking about controlling objects by using the power of your brainwaves. Hello, I'm Shannon Skinner, and this is Extraordinary Women TV. My guest today is Ariel Garten. She is the CEO and co-founder of InteraXon, which is a Toronto-based company specializing in thought-controlled computing. Now, she's also a psychotherapist and a fashion designer, and she's also been a researcher with the Krembil Neuroscience Center. Really grateful she's here in the studio today. You'll meet her in a moment. Later in the segment, before we take a break, I'll have my regular Good to Know Minute when I ask my guests for their top success tip. And you'll hear Ariel's. Welcome to the show, Ariel.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you for having me here.
Oh, it's so nice having you here, and you look so beautiful in that color.
Thank you. It's one of my favorites.
Now, you're also known as a brain guru. You've had a very interesting and diverse background in your career, which has been in areas of real estate, design, psychotherapy, neuroscience. You're an entrepreneur now, and you've managed to close the gap between science, art, business, and technology. And it has said that that's a very difficult thing to do. And what does that mean for you by closing the gap between all of these disciplines?
Well, for me, there was never a gap between these disciplines. As a kid, people would always ask me like, oh, how can you be an artist and a scientist? Or how can you do fantastic in mathematics and science and be the fashion designer at the school play? And it was a very strange question because I never saw these things as different. Art and science aren't fundamentally the same. There's the same human creativity that goes into designing a science experiment or making the pattern for a dress. So closing the gap for me is about bringing the disciplines together in a way that they can support one another to make better solutions.
Now you've, of course, your primary role right now is running InteraXon.
Yes.
You have been a fashion designer. You ran your own fashion boutique at one point. And you still are a practicing psychotherapist, that's correct?
I am. I've always sort of loved fashion and design. My mother was an artist, and so I would always watch her make things and realize that you could make whatever you want in the world. So as a kid, like many kids, I made little clothes for my dolls, and I borrowed my mom's sewing machine when I was 16 and started to make dresses. And in high school, I had a little line of t-shirts. I started making shirts and said, hey, I can sell these things. So I went down to Queen Street in Toronto and went from store to store to store saying, will you put my shirts in your store on consignment? And 2 stores said yes, and all of a sudden I was a clothing designer. At the same time, I was continued on in arts and sciences, and I'm sure we'll get more into that background later. But when I graduated from my neuroscience degree at University of Toronto, I thought I really need to try the fashion thing, so I opened a clothing store. It turned out that my apartment was on the main floor of a popular downtown busy street, so I turned it into a clothing store. Nobody knew that it was a residential place. It looked completely commercial, and started my own fashion line.
Now, you've also exhibited art at the AGO, is that correct, at the Art Gallery of Ontario?
Yes, so while I was in university, I was always making stuff. I was doing a neuroscience degree and really exploring form and function and how they interplayed and continually sort of like undermining the two. Like in my kitchen, the shelving units were chairs that had been repurposed into shelves. And so I was always asking people to question, what is this object? What is it used for? Why do we give it this title? And is there something new that we can do with it? Is there a fundamental structure that we can unseat to create something new, different, and better? So what I exhibited at the AGO was actually part of my fashion collection. It was a line of clothing called concrete clothing. I had actually taken concrete and embedded it in fabric so that I created a fabric textured like the city. And so it was asking you to essentially wear your urban jungle. And it was all of the line of the clothing had these boxes that popped in and out in shapes that could be both very rigid and very soft depending on which way you popped the shape in or out of the fabric. It was quite nifty.
Now, and all of this brought you to create InteraXon. So let's talk about that. What is InteraXon? What does it do?
So InteraXon is a innovations technology company in Toronto, and we create thought-controlled computing, products, applications, and experiences. Now, you're giving me the look that everybody gives me when I say thought-controlled computing. What on earth do you mean? Well, thought-controlled computing is exactly what it sounds like. It's the ability to engage with technology using your mind. So it works using a simple sensor on your forehead that reads your brain waves and allows you to interact with content on your computer or your smartphone or your tablet just by thinking.
So now you can, in doing some research and looking on your site and whatnot, there are games that people can play using their thoughts.
Sure, we've created a whole myriad of things that you can do with your mind. And I know this sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's real and it's here. So some applications are gaming, as you mentioned. You can drive a cursor. If it's a driving game, you could drive the car just with your thoughts. Other applications are musical. You can interact with musical content. You can, in the far future, control lighting systems in your home. But the best applications, the technology that we've discovered right now, is the fact that you can see inside your own mind. So we basically have a window into your mental activity, which you can see on a screen, and then you can use that information to be able to improve your own mental state, improve your cognitive functioning, your connection with yourself, your emotional regulation.
Well, is this something that you would use with your patients then in your practice?
It's actually not something I've ever used with my patients because I'm really careful to keep the two separate.
Okay.
So it's not, my patients come for their own issues and it's not my prerogative to impose the thing that I think is cool on them.
Sure.
So I'm very careful to keep the line separate. But we've used this in, well, I'll give you one example. At the Olympics, the Vancouver 2010 Winter Olympics, we were hired by the Ontario government to create a massive installation where people in Vancouver could control the lighting on the CN Tower, the Canadian Parliament buildings, and Niagara Falls with their mind from across the country.
Now, how did that work? I mean, how did you manage to pull that off?
That was a near impossible feat. It was back in the early founding of the company when it was just me and my two co-founders, Chris and Trevor. And we came up with this concept. We were really dreaming big. We said, what's the biggest thing we can do with this technology? And we said, the Olympics. What so happened, the Olympics were happening in Canada the next year, so it wasn't that strange. And we got an email out of the blue from the Ministry of Research and Innovation asking us to showcase our technology at the Minister's Innovations Awards. And I said, okay, well, I'll do that only if you take this little proposal that we put together to control a small lighting installation at the Olympics and give it to whoever's responsible in the government for the project. And I got an email back about 2 weeks later saying, sure, we'll do it. Can we do it in the Ontario colors? And of course, all of us were completely in amazement. We've just been invited to do something for the Olympics with this technology that is so nascent. And that started this phenomenal path where over 5 months, we created something on an extraordinarily limited budget with a technology that was utterly unproven with a tiny, tiny little team that went from 3 to 25 in order to create something for the Olympics across 3 different levels of government with these massive icons that the Ontario government decided was actually going to be their showcase at the Vancouver 2010 Winter Games.
Were people blown away?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So you walked into the Ontario House and you sat in a chair facing a large 16:9 screen that was a live feed to the icon that you'd be interacting with. So if it was the CN Tower, for example, there was this huge live feed to the CN Tower, so you could see what you were doing in real time. You had about 1.5 minutes of training to slip on a headset and learn what it feels like to control something with your brainwaves. And then you had 1.5 minutes to go live on the tower. And you'd see people calling oh my God, Dad, look up, that's Mom doing it. That's Mom doing it. She's making the lights spin on the CN Tower.
So did you have people sort of finding it a bit freaky?
There's definitely people who feel it's freaky, and that's always a question with new technology. It's something that people feel fear about, and we're always right to question what is appropriate new technology and appropriate uses, but then there's also the excitement of the technology, what it can do and its potential. So
you did something else that was really interesting, is you had 2 hot tubs in the city. Let's talk about that.
Okay, well that was definitely one of the more artistic applications of the technology. We had, that was in collaboration with Professor Steve Mann, who was one of the people who really founded the brainwave technology that we work with, and I've collaborated with him on a number of different projects. In this one we had 2 hot tubs in different areas of the city, and we were sending biodata from one to the other. It was during SARS, if you recall, when Toronto was stricken with SARS, and everybody was really concerned about contamination. So this was a play on the concept of quarantine and contamination. So you're asked to sort of enter into this communal wash space with people that was both very, cleansing and, sanitizing, but at the same point, like kind of almost uncomfortably communal. And people jumped in with great enthusiasm. We also had other people participating via the internet. So we had people that couldn't otherwise be physically present. I believe there were Parkinson's patients as well that were able to participate in this kind of collective experience of sharing data and knowledge.
So Ariel, now I know that you have a levitating chair.
Yes.
Now tell me about that.
So it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a levitating chair. It's a 60s ball chair, and as you sit in it, and you relax, that leads to an increase in your alpha waves, which our system can detect, which causes the chair to rise. So it really does seem like this science fiction, weird 60s moment, but literally relaxing will raise the chair to the ceiling. Now, of course, this happens because there's a winch in the ceiling, which is activated by my brainwaves. It used to live in our old office, and it's actually the thing that inspired the Ministry of Innovation and Research to contact us in the first place.
Well, it's really fascinating stuff. Now, Ariel, we're just going to take a break, and that means it's my Good to Know Minute, and I know you have a great success tip, so you just go right ahead.
So my success tip would be to not worry about the outcomes and only think about the thing you want to do. It's really easy to think about something that you want to achieve and then think of all the barriers that are in your way. If you do that, it may be likely that you won't try to do any of these things because the barriers seem so huge. But in essence, you can accomplish anything you want. You can overcome any barrier. Think about the goal, and as soon as you reach the barrier, understand what you need to do to solve it, and don't pile up too many on top of one another.
Well, that is good to know. Thank you for that. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, more with Ariel Garten, CEO and co-founder of InteraXon. So stay where you are. Welcome back to the show. I'm Shannon Skinner, and I'm speaking with Ariel Garten. She is the co-founder and CEO of InteraXon, which is a Toronto-based company specializing in thought control computing. Interesting topic, controlling objects with the power of your brainwaves. Now, you're a woman who has crossed many disciplines. Now, technology and science is sort of one area that you touch on. Do you think that women are well represented in these areas, in science and technology?
Women are definitely well represented in science. When I look at our hiring patterns, I would say when I'm hiring a neuroscientist, it's a 50% likelihood that it's going to be male or female. When I'm hiring somebody from biology, it's more likely that they'll be female than male. This is at least in Toronto. Engineering, I'd say it's maybe 20% women. Computer science, maybe 10% women. So when you start to get into, and mathematics, maybe 10 to 20% women again. So when you start to get into the harder science, engineering and math, at this point the representation in women is still quite low, even though I see a big difference between hiring students and hiring adults. And in adults, there's many fewer women, whereas when you're hiring students, there's starting to be an influx into engineering and mathematics from women. When I think about running a computer, technology company as a woman, I generally find about a 5% representation. I was invited to a conference of 50 best and brightest in tech, and there were 5 of us that were female and 45 that were male.
Wow. Yeah, that's quite a...
It's still a massive divide.
Right. Do you, for words of encouragement for other young women who might want to follow that path, what would you say to them?
That there's absolutely no difference in being a male or a female in technology. Indeed, I probably have some advantages as a woman in technology because I'm a rarity. So it creates a more compelling story, something that people are more curious about.
So is it more of a benefit than a challenge then?
It's definitely more of a benefit than a challenge in my case.
Well,
I haven't
great.
actually met I don't believe that I've met any barriers because I'm a woman. I've never felt any barriers. When I walk into a fundraising meeting or I'm negotiating a contract, I don't think anybody responds differently based on the fact that I'm male or female, except I might get a little advantage because I've got surprise on my hand.
Now, you studied neuroscience. What attracted you to neuroscience to begin with?
Knowing how the mind works, knowing how the body works. So in high school, I keep sort of tracking my history here. In high school, I both held a job in a research laboratory and was the lead in the school play, did the costumes for, the student fashion shows. I was always doing art and science at the same time. When I got to university, it was really about neuroscience for me because I found out that there's this thing that's even more interesting than how the world works. It's how the mind works and how people work. So I wanted to understand from this really minute perspective. I wanted to deconstruct so I could put it all back together again.
And you've done it in a very beautiful way.
Thank you.
Now, and what does the future look like for InteraXon and what you're doing?
So we are bringing our first consumer product to market in spring of 2013.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's great.
So up until now, we've been working with big companies, helping them understand the technology and how it's going to be integrated into future products and services. And we've been doing large-scale installations of technology where thousands of people at a time can interact with it. And now we're bringing our first consumer product to market, which is a slim and beautiful little headband that connects wirelessly to your smartphone or tablet and allows you to interact with content and yourself with your mind.
So what are the applications for the future of this kind of technology then?
So the immediate applications that you're going to see on the market are these applications that help you see inside yourself and improve your state. So you're looking at brain training applications, meditation tools. In the short term, we'll probably see ADD trainers for kids. Kids with ADD have heightened levels of theta waves or dream state and lowered levels of beta waves. And 20 hours of working with a brainwave system like this can improve ADD symptoms as effectively as Ritalin. It's really phenomenal.
So they could not take drugs and instead it's sort of like a biofeedback system in a way?
Yeah, neurofeedback system
interesting.
in that case.
Yeah.
When we look further out, 5 years down the road, once there's a critical mass of headsets in the market, you're going to start to do things like sharing and communicating using brainwave data, tagging photos on Facebook with the emotions that you felt when you saw the photo, being able to have your iPod track your feelings while you listen to different songs and then play music to support your mood. So if you're depressed, your phone might know and then play the songs that it knows make you happy.
Well, it does sound sort of like science fiction, but I mean, you're doing it.
It's real. When you think about the positioning of voice-activated technology 30 years ago, it seemed like complete and total science fiction. And now my mom dials me by saying my name as she drives. It's just a natural part of our lives. So too will thought-engaged technologies become a sort of natural user interface about 25 years down the road.
Do you ever have doubts in yourself as you're creating, this amazing technology going forward? Do you ever doubt yourself?
Do I ever doubt myself? Of course. I mean, we all doubt ourselves. Am I smart enough? Am I capable enough? Am I going to be able to figure out the market effectively enough? But the key is to not dwell on those doubts and to move forward with, vision and boldness and inspire the others around you to galvanize to something that is really clear is going to work.
Now, Ariel, if anyone out there wants to know more about InteraXon, where do they go?
You can go to our website, InteraXon.ca. We're going to be having a crowdfunding campaign launching shortly, which everybody can participate in, and you can find that out at our website. You can join our newsletter, or you can tweet at me.
Now, this has been a really inspiring time. I thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about this amazing technology that you've created, and quite an interesting, diverse career. And I certainly wish you all the best in what you do, and thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I've been speaking with Ariel Garten. She is the CEO and co-founder of InteraXon, and of course, if for more information about her, you can visit my website at extraordinarywomentv.com. And if you're interested in finding out more about the show or contacting me, of course, you can find out my contact information through my website. Again, it's extraordinarywomentv.com. Well, if you are interested in transforming your life, I hope these stories inspire you. You've been watching Extraordinary Women TV. I'm Shannon Skinner. See you soon.